last year's drought, what did that do to all of our local trees?
Stressed them. If you have a tree and you're in this area, the whole state actually, and parts of Texas and Arkansas and Mississippi, and you weren't regularly irrigating your tree is water stressed. Even now, after these few rainfalls that we have, it doesn't happen overnight to stress them, and it takes, they're big organisms, really big organisms. It takes them a while to recharge and kind of shift gears and start putting their energy into things other than just surviving the drought.
What are signs that they're drought stressed still? Is there something you can look for in your tree and like, oh, that tree is in trouble?
On the tree, maybe not so much right now. On the weather reports, yes. Just the fact, I know even without looking at the tree that it's water stressed, just because of the duration of the drought period last year and also the heat. The combination was really bad. Now, as far as actually identifying a tree that, I mean, I just took it out of the equation. It's stressed. But how stressed is a matter of degree. The tree that's behind us that we were talking about earlier that doesn't have any leaves on it, that's stressed to the point of mortality. Other trees, if you might see some dieback, you need to tend to that with a saw, get it out of there so it doesn't become a hazard for people and animals and property. But the thing about the drought is that we go for 2 weeks without a measurable rain. You need to be watering your trees. Period.
If we had the drought last summer, you say they're still stressed now.
Sure.
What length of time would it be that we say, okay, we're recovered? Do we need to have an equal and opposite year of rainfall surplus, or how does that work?
I don't know that anybody actually knows the answer to that question, and trees are so variable. Some big old ones may not recharge as quickly as younger trees. So I would say, we need to have drought breaker rains is what we need to have. And I don't think that anything we've gotten so far could be officially a drought breaker. I've been looking at the drought monitor for some time. We're looking for higher than above normal temperatures, which is stressful, and higher than normal number of days without rain. So we're looking forward to maybe not a summer as bad as last summer, but it's going to be bad enough that if you're not irrigating the tree, the problems that are caused from last year are just going to be exacerbated.
Speak to that a little bit. You and I had a conversation inside. What is the proper way to irrigate your tree?
With a hose. That's a good way. If you can. A lot of people have trees that are way beyond any, local bib or hose or anything. I, at home, will use the soaker hose. I've actually bought it by the roll and cut them to length. They're around the tree permanently, and when I need to water, I just plug it up and let it go for a couple of days on very, very low. If you don't have soaker hoses and you don't want to take that route, you can just put your hose on a very low volume and just let it drip. If you take the circumference of the area that you want to irrigate and cut it into 4 quarters, you can just put the hose in each quarter for maybe a couple hours. If you're seeing runoff, you're watering too fast, just dial it back a little bit. If you're seeing runoff after 2 days of doing this, you probably saturated the soil. Ideally, you want to get down to about 6 inches or moist, and you can test that with a screwdriver or some type of sharp instrument. If it's easy to push it in, the soil is going to be moist enough. If you can't get it in there, that soil is so concrete, dry, and very hard, you won't be able to penetrate it up to let's say that you've got a 12-inch screwdriver. You do want to come up to the handle, right? So that's a very low-tech way of doing it, but for a homeowner trying to figure out where the water's needed, it's a really easy way.
So from a scientific kind of and mathematical approach, one of the things we broadcast weekly, and I think this might be geared more towards lawns, so tell me if this can't go the same for trees, but by the middle of summer, I know there's a number, I forget, we go to a NOAA site and be like, well, in this area you need 2.1 inches of water a week to sustain. Pretty sure it's for lawns. Does the same apply to trees, or is it really the 6-inch rule?
You need about an inch.
An inch
you want to be able to penetrate the screwdriver to 6 inches.
But it doesn't necessarily.
But that takes about an inch of water.
Okay, yeah.
It takes about an inch.
So those numbers are pretty accurate. About an inch a week would be good.
Yes, and the idea that with trees is their roots are a little bit deeper, and it's going to take a little bit longer to deliver that water, which is why we suggest a slow drip. Just let it have time. And if you use a soaker hose or the drip method, you're not really wasting a lot of water to evaporation. If you use a sprinkler, you're just throwing money down the toilet, essentially. There's just so much evaporative loss. They typically tell you not to water your garden at nighttime because of mold and fungal issues. But if you're not spraying or watering the foliage of the tree, then you can just leave that hose on overnight if you want to.
And you told me there was one other really cheap, efficient thing you can do for your trees as well.
Mulch.
Yeah.
Mulch, M-U-L-C-H, mulch, mulch your trees. There are tree companies all over this city that are taking down trees in preparation for storm season. They're going to have chips that they have to pay to put in the in the landfill. Contact a local tree company and see if you can get a load of chips. If you get fresh chips like you would from an arborist, you can take them maybe 5-6 inches deep. I wouldn't go much deeper than that. They have a lot of sugar still in the water that will make them kind of get hot if you pile them too deep. But even fresh, coarse chips on your soil under the tree it's 1,000-fold better than just having turf or nothing under that tree. It doesn't cause a lot of erosion. It's a great place for earthworms and all kinds of organisms that live in the soil that keep the soil alive. And by keeping the soil alive, you keep everything that depends on the soil alive as well. So really, the cheapest two things and best things that you can do for your tree is to mulch them. And it can be cheap, not in sweat equity, but certainly if you get a load of chips from an arborist without having to pay to buy mulch at a retailer. And water. If you're conservative with the water and you don't spray it and lose a lot of it to evaporation, every drop goes to a good reason, gives a good outcome, and you're not paying a fortune. I did have higher than normal water bills last year, but they weren't exorbitant by any means. Certainly not as expensive as having to remove a tree. That's an expensive proposition. There's a lot that goes into that, and it's not that it's not money well spent, but if you don't have to spend it, if you can keep your trees in the landscape, that's the best idea.
That's a tree that needs to be addressed.
Well, if you see obvious signs of dieback or death of tissue, any kind of necrosis, so it could be patches of bark falling off the trunk or the roots. If you see that the tree is browning down, those are not good signs. Some trees are more damaged than others because they have higher water needs. Some trees were damaged by the extraordinary heat. And I suspect that we'll see more topples and breakage in windstorms. So if you have a tree that you've been thinking about having it deadwooded or cleaned up a little bit, go ahead and do it. One thing I do want to say is that homeowners all over the world, I was going to say in this area, but it's all over the world, love to do this thing called lion's tailing, which is where they clean out the interior of the canopy and they kind of make this idealized, artistic looking tree that you can kind of see through, and they think that the wind passes through better, it gets more light down to the ground so you can grow grass or flowers. That's horrible for trees. Don't do it. Don't let your arborist talk you into it, just don't do it. The best thing to do is to retain some, if not the majority of that interior foliage, because that's how the tree feeds itself when it's so hot that the outer leaves are not doing their business. There's a certain cutoff temperature for photosynthesis, and that's how a tree feeds itself, is to make sugar that it uses to do everything else with. And at temperatures above like 86 degrees Fahrenheit, the tree shuts down that sugar factory.
So all summer here.
During the daytime, during the heat of the day,
we're in the 90s,
absolutely.
yeah.
But those interior leaves are at a cooler temperature because that photosynthetic process puts out all this cooling water vapor, there's shade, and so on and so forth. So while the outer leaves are taking their afternoon nap, the interior leaves are actually working to feed the tree. And so as hot as it was last summer, there probably wasn't nearly as much photosynthesis going on as you might expect. And so those trees are going to be kind of on a diet. They're not going to be up to snuff for a while. They they still need to recuperate in terms of water and biomass accumulation through photosynthesis.
And I guess the follow-up on just kind of, we talked about some signs, what to identify. Is there an inherent breed or type of tree that is naturally more prone to hurricane winds, and or some sort of dieback on trees you look for that tree would be most prone to die back in a hurricane, or most prone to be taken down in a hurricane?
Well, I worked with some researchers out of Florida some years ago that we actually went out after hurricanes and looked at trees on the ground and calculated which ones were more likely to fall and which ones weren't. And the findings suggest that lower stature trees, so your crepe myrtles, your hollies, anything that's kind of intermediate size to small size, stands up really well. Think about it for 2 seconds. The wind speed's a lot higher up there than it is down there. So that's good. Among the taller or the larger stature trees that we love so much for shade, right? Bald cypress is a good one. Magnolia is a good one for wind. And so is live oak. I mean, live oak co-evolved.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely co-evolved with storms. So they're wide and got wide root systems and they're very short. That's perfect for tolerating hurricane wind.
Pines and red oak bad, right?
Yeah, pines. If I were to buy a house today and there are pines on the property, I would remove them before I moved in. I've seen what they do to homes. And red oaks, as beautiful and gorgeous and wonderful as they are, they tend to hold on to their leaves in high wind, and so that kind of acts as sails, and they'll come over right out of the roots. Water oak, of course, has a lot of decay issues, and so it will break and throw branches. Sweet gum, okay, but in terms of the really tall trees, the really big shade trees, mag and I would say bald cypress and magnolia are really good bets.
Anything else you want to add?
If you can retain your tree and water it and keep it healthy, you can keep your tree and you don't have to pay to have it removed. And that unnecessary tree removal is a bad thing for everybody. So if you can keep your tree, keep your tree.
Actually, that gave me a follow-up. I don't know if there's probably not a number, but like if a tree, all signs, intents and purposes, looks to be in good health, what are the chances it comes down a hurricane? Or is a healthy tree probably going to stand up in a hurricane?
It depends on the wind speed. If it's a straight line wind, which we don't get a whole lot of in a hurricane, but nothing's going to stand up to 115, 120 miles an hour. It's going to be really tough. If your tree is healthy, or it looks good, and you want to retain it, it's got good structure. I didn't even talk about structure. And you're watering it, you're taking care of it, you've mulched it, you're irrigating it, you're making sure that it's doing its absolute best, I wouldn't be too afraid. If it's hanging over my bedroom, and it's a branch that big around, I might think about it. That's a lot of weight.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of trees that are too close to buildings. We have a lot of trees that are poorly maintained. We have a lot of trees that have very poor structure. And after last summer, all of our trees were water stressed. So I don't want to do or say anything that would encourage people removing trees unnecessarily from the landscape. But if it's a dangerous tree, this is the year to take it out. This is even if you don't take out the whole tree, even if you just have it limbed down to the point where it's not going to catch the wind, turn it into a wildlife tree. That's your neighbors may not like it. Put a vine on it or do something. But taking big trees out unnecessarily it really does hurt everybody.